Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you're watching from today. I'd love to know. And if you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to like and subscribe. All right, let's jump in. The stars above Core Reach shimmered in soft waves, untouched and perfect like glass. This part of the galaxy, the inner spine of the Galactic Empire, was the safest place in known space. No one entered without clearance. Nothing unknown ever got this close. But tonight, something had changed. Something cold. Something human. Admiral Jern of the Empire's Home Guard stood in the observation ring of Skywatch Station, high above the planet Selveron. He wasn't blinking. His six-fingered hand gripped the rail in silence as the display feed refreshed again. "That's not possible," he muttered. "There's no way a warship crossed 5 sectors without being seen." But the data didn't lie. Floating just outside the defense ring, tucked perfectly in the shadow of a dead moon, was an object not listed in any of their systems. No name, no ID, no signal. And yet, it looked unmistakably Terran. "Scan it again," he barked. The technician ran it 3 more times. Same answer, same silence. Massive, armored, unpowered, just there. The silence was worse than any weapon. "They're not transmitting," said a young officer, her voice shaking. "It's like they don't need to." Jern didn't answer. His breath hitched as the full silhouette of the vessel appeared, a shape that hadn't been seen this deep into Empire territory in over 30 years. Human design, Earth-forged. And not just any ship. It was a dreadnought. Except it wasn't on any path. No warp signature, no defense notice. It had simply appeared. "They're not just inside the line," Jern whispered. "They're sitting at our doorstep. And we didn't even hear them knock." No alarms had gone off when the ship entered Core Reach. No border patrols triggered. No long-range defense satellites activated. It had slipped through layer upon layer of Imperial surveillance like a ghost walking into a palace. That was what chilled Admiral Jern the most. The Galactic Empire's core worlds were not just protected, they were untouchable. 5 rings of fortified sectors, each with overlapping patrols, biometric beacons, and a live AI monitoring system, updated every 3 seconds. The Empire had invested 3 generations of wealth and blood into keeping this space pure, imperial. It was their final red line. And yet, here was a warship, older than some of the officers aboard Skywatch, sitting still like it belonged here. "If that thing came to attack, we wouldn't be having this meeting," muttered Commander Yalex, tapping nervously on his datapad. "We'd already be ash." Admiral Jern didn't look away from the display. "Then why is it here?" No one had an answer. The bridge was silent except for the hum of terminals and the slow clicking of claws against the command rail. The warship hadn't moved. It hadn't spoken. But its very presence was loud, a kind of quiet that pushed on the lungs, made it hard to breathe. "They must know where they are," someone finally said. "The core isn't an accident. This is a message." Jern turned sharply. "If it's a message, then we need to understand what it's saying before it's too late." But the message was already clear to him, deep down in the part of his mind that remembered the old reports, the ones they weren't supposed to talk about anymore, the ones that had been sealed. It wasn't just that the humans had entered forbidden space. It was that they'd done it without being seen, and that meant something had changed. "Sir," the comms officer said, her voice tight, "shall I hail them?" Jern didn't answer right away. The warship sat like a shadow against the dark side of the moon, invisible to anything but direct sight. Its engines were dark, but he knew the silence was intentional. The humans weren't being stealthy because they had to. They were being silent because they wanted to be heard. "No," he said finally. "Don't reach out. Not yet." "But if we wait, if we say the wrong thing, we invite war." The word hung heavy in the air. War. The kind of war the galaxy hadn't seen in nearly a century. The kind that left star systems silent and planets cracked open. The kind only humans seemed to fight to the end. A junior officer leaned forward. "What if they've come back to finish it?" That question landed like a weight. The Empire had fought hard to forget what happened during the Terran conflicts, to bury the battles under diplomacy and trade routes, to call the treaty a victory. But no one had ever truly believed that, because you don't forget a predator. You just stop seeing it for a while. Jern stepped away from the main console and walked to the inner table. He tapped his access code, unlocking a file that hadn't been opened in decades. It was sealed under legacy clearance, red stamped with the emblem of the last human war. "This file," he said slowly, "details the last time we saw this kind of ship, the Black Sun campaign." Some of the younger officers looked up in confusion. "The one that destroyed the Harnix line?" Yalex asked. Jern nodded. "In 24 hours. "That was a myth," one officer whispered. "It was history," Jern corrected. "We lost 6 sectors overnight, not because we were outgunned, but because we didn't understand what they were capable of. We assumed they'd fight like us. We were wrong." He zoomed the display in. The silhouette of the warship grew clearer now. Sleek, brutal, almost beautiful in its silence. A Terran siege-class model, long thought decommissioned. "But if they're not attacking, then what are they doing?" Yalex asked. "Waiting," Jern said, "for us to flinch." Across the Core Reach defense network, commands were being rerouted. Patrol fleets changed vectors. Power grids shifted into high alert. But none of it felt like control. It felt like panic trying to look like a plan. The Admiral leaned forward, folding his hands. "We need to understand something," he said. "This ship didn't sneak past us. It walked right through. It bypassed every checkpoint, every scanner, every defense. Not because it's invisible, but because we were never looking in the right direction." He turned to his crew. "What if this ship is just the beginning?" A long silence. "Sir," said the comms officer suddenly, "new transmission just came through. Short range, unencrypted, from the human vessel." Everyone on the bridge froze. "On screen," Jern said. The message was text only. No voice, no encryption. Just 7 words. "Your walls are hollow. We are watching." No signature. No reply line. Just that. The bridge fell into total silence. Jern felt his throat tighten, not from fear of what they'd do, but from the realization that the humans had already done it. The Empire's strongest defense network had been compromised, not with firepower, but with a whisper. They hadn't sent a fleet. They hadn't fired a shot. They just walked through the front door and let the Empire realize far too late that it was never locked. And that was when the real fear took hold. Because if the humans could get this close without being seen, then they could already be anywhere. And no one would know until it was far too late. On board the Vindicator, the human warship that now loomed like a silent shadow above the Empire's heart, the atmosphere was anything but tense. Commander Elias Roke stood near the central display of the command deck, one hand resting on the rail, the other curled around a metal mug. The dark ceramic was chipped, old, and worn smooth by time, just like him. He sipped calmly, watching the data feeds scroll past. Enemy patrols rerouting, emergency codes transmitting, surveillance grids locking into high alert, all exactly as predicted. "They still think we're only one ship," said Lieutenant Mara Quinn from her station to his right. She didn't look up. Her fingers danced over a curved interface, tracking the growing ripple of panic moving across the core defense web. Roke didn't smile. He didn't need to. "They always think that," he said, voice low, almost bored. "That's why it works." The Vindicator's bridge was quiet. There were no blinking lights, no sirens. The human ship didn't need noise to feel powerful. Its stillness was deliberate. Every second of silence, an invisible hand closing around the Empire's throat. Beneath the calm hum of the ship's systems, deep within the steel bones of the dreadnought, hundreds of classified protocols ran silently in parallel. Terran stealth tech wasn't just about hiding. It was about erasing presence, rewriting what sensors believed to be true. To the Empire's surveillance systems, the Vindicator hadn't just snuck past. It had never existed. Roke took another sip, his eyes narrowing as new data surfaced. "They've issued a priority scramble for Sector Core Prime, pulling in everything short of their palace guards," Mara said, "but they're not scrambling against us." He nodded slowly. "Because they don't know what to target." Across the screen, 32 Empire vessels were repositioning, trying to box in an enemy they hadn't seen move. Some were rerouting from defense of high-level government worlds. Others had broken formation entirely, confused by ghost signals left in the Vindicator's wake. "They still think we want to fight," Roke said, mostly to himself. "That's not what this is." Lieutenant Quinn finally looked up. "Then what is this?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned back to the viewport. Beyond the reinforced glass, the moon they orbited glowed dimly with reflected starlight. No one had ever thought of this place as vulnerable. The core worlds were legends, untouchable, unbeatable. But legends, Roke knew, were just stories waiting for a better storyteller. "This isn't a battle," he said finally. "It's a correction." Behind him, deeper in the ship, hatches hissed open and closed as black-armored operatives moved silently through the halls. No insignias, no flags. Ghost units from a war the galaxy tried to forget. They weren't here for war, not yet. But they were awake. And when ghosts moved, it was only for a reason. Roke walked back toward the central console and tapped into a hidden data thread. A small hologram blinked into life, an encrypted feed from one of their embedded probes within the Empire's internal channels. A face appeared, pale, scaled, nervous. An Empire diplomat, speaking in hushed tones to an off-screen figure. "They're already here," the alien said. "You don't understand. They bypassed every layer. No alarms, no trace. This isn't just a ship. It's a message. The humans are inside." The feed ended. Mara frowned. "You think they'll listen now?" Roke's gaze darkened. "They'll listen. Question is whether they'll understand." Because this wasn't about revenge. Not anymore. The humans hadn't come to start a war. They'd come to remind the galaxy of something it had chosen to forget. That peace without respect is just a longer leash. That silence isn't surrender. It's waiting. And humanity had waited long enough. Roke brought up another feed, this one deep inside the Empire's command network. He watched as a meeting unfolded. Hollow-faced admirals, council strategists, claws drumming, voices tense. They spoke of possibilities, of theories. No one wanted to say the real thing. No one wanted to admit they were afraid. They still don't know what we're here for, Mara said. That's the point, Roke replied. They'd built the Vindicator not to destroy, but to deliver fear with precision. It carried enough firepower to level a moon, but none of its guns had powered on. That wasn't the weapon. The silence was. Any update from our sleeper node in Deep Relay? He asked. Nothing yet, Mara replied. But encryption bands on their Sector Black files just shifted. Someone's checking something. Roke nodded. He didn't need to send warnings. They'd already sent themselves. Because somewhere deep inside the Empire's private vaults, beneath layers of secrets buried behind old war records and erased transmissions, was a folder labeled in red, Project Veil. And Roke knew that the moment they opened it, the moment they read the words, human operative detained, status, unregistered, everything would fall into place. They'd realize this wasn't just a ship making a statement. It was a reckoning. The Empire had taken someone important. They'd broken the treaty in the dark, thinking the humans would never find out. But the humans had always known. They just hadn't answered. Until now. And Roke was the answer they never wanted. They'll stall, he said finally. Try to buy time. Try to figure out what we want. Mara tilted her head. Do we? Roke looked at her. Yes, we want them to remember. She frowned. Remember what? Roke turned back to the viewport. His reflection staring back like a ghost made real. What happens, he said quietly, when humans stop asking for permission? And outside, across the cold curtain of space, the Empire's warships kept closing in. But none of them realized they weren't surrounding a ship. They were walking into a cage, and the door was already shut. On the surface of Veltrax Prime, deep beneath the shimmering towers of the Empire's core intelligence citadel, an entire floor of strategists and analysts had slipped into quiet panic. The chamber pulsed with soft white light from layered hollow screens, each displaying live feeds of the core defense grid. Warships moving, civilian traffic frozen, surveillance satellites flickering from signal interference that hadn't been detected until it was already too late. There was no chatter now, no shouting, just the kind of focused silence that only appeared when no one knew what to say, only what they feared. Director Salen Voth stood at the center of it all. His sharp robes hung stiffly off his frame, lined with the gold sigils of high command. He had served the Empire through 2 regime shifts and 6 planetary insurrections, but nothing had ever made him feel like this. A single warship, no markings, no demands, and yet here it was, anchored like a knife at the throat of their greatest security ring, unmoved, untouched, unafraid. This doesn't make sense, said one of the junior analysts, sweat glistening beneath her pale fur. Their power readings are minimal, no active weapons, no defensive barriers. How are they projecting this much pressure without? They're not projecting, Voth cut in. We are absorbing. The words landed like ice. Across the chamber, eyes turned. He walked slowly toward the central projector, waving his fingers to call up a classified thread. It was buried under 3 levels of encryption, labeled in red clearance sigils that no one in the room had seen in over a decade. Project Veil. As the files decrypted, the room dimmed. The screen pulsed once, and then the truth unfolded. 3 months ago, the Empire's covert extraction unit, the Null Division, had intercepted a small human vessel near the edge of the Grallian Rift. It was drifting on low emissions, its hull partially cracked from radiation storms, but its signature had been unmistakable: Terran. The report listed minimal armament, small crew, no threat indicators. It had been tagged for salvage. But then came the next line: biological intercept, human, unregistered, status, contained. The air in the chamber grew heavy. Voth leaned forward. What you're all feeling right now, that's the weight of a mistake. One we didn't know we made. One that they didn't forget. He brought up the internal memo, classified, unsigned. It noted that the humans on board had resisted capture, that 2 Dominion agents had died during containment, that the survivors had been rerouted off-grid to a site designated Cell Black 12. At the mention of that name, a silence fell even deeper than before. "Sir," one of the aides finally whispered, "that facility isn't on any official manifest." "That's the point," Voth replied. Black Cell 12 was a ghost facility, hidden inside a hollowed asteroid, masked from standard scans. It was one of the Empire's last untouched relics from the war era, used for experiments too sensitive to be acknowledged, even now. Neural engineering, DNA extraction, combat optimization. Things the Empire had promised the galaxy they'd abandoned. But apparently, they hadn't. "We told ourselves they were gone," Voth said, "that the humans had retreated to their borders, that the silence meant surrender." He gestured to the hollow, where the Vindicator still floated silently just outside their planetary defense line. But that silence? It was just their patience growing sharper. One of the strategists stood, shaking slightly. "We need to send a diplomatic envoy, offer something, release the prisoners, issue an apology, something." Voth shook his head. Too late. The hollow screen updated again. A live feed from one of the outer defense satellites, clearly hacked, showed a new anomaly: 7 faint energy signatures slowly revealing themselves from behind the Vindicator. Stealth ships, human-built, precision-designed, and deadly. "They didn't come alone," Voth whispered. The realization struck the chamber like a thunderclap. Not just a show of force, a coordinated maneuver. A ghost fleet inside the Empire's most secure region, and no one had seen them arrive. "They've already breached Black Cell 12, Voth said. "That's what this is about." He tapped his console again, pulling up secondary surveillance. Grainy footage flickered to life, internal views from the lab, likely delayed. But even through the static, the damage was clear. Hallways shredded, security turrets fried, walls painted in warning lights. And then came the last frame. A child, small, silent, wrapped in a thermal cloak, her eyes locked on the camera with a stillness that didn't belong to her age. The feed cut. The room stood frozen. She was one of the prototypes, Voth murmured. Part of an old Terran initiative we thought they'd shut down. Bioevolution programs. Survivors built for impossible environments. He paused. She isn't just human. She's the next human. Sir, the aide whispered again. If she's what they came for, and she's already out, what happens now? Voth didn't blink. Now? He said. Now we find out whether the galaxy survives the answer. Outside the Citadel, the planetary defense grid continued its slow rise to maximum readiness. Gunships idled in orbit, waiting for orders no one wanted to give. Inside the core intelligence chamber, the command team scrambled to prepare countermeasures, evacuation routes, encrypted relays. But somewhere inside it all, a truth was beginning to settle like dust on forgotten ruins. The humans hadn't just returned. They'd evolved. And whatever was inside that girl, it wasn't just a threat to the Empire. It was a mirror, a reflection of everything the Empire had become. Cold, controlling, obsessed with power, willing to hurt and hide and erase whatever it couldn't understand. And now it was standing at their doorstep, asking nothing, demanding nothing, just watching, waiting, the calm before the judgment. And from across the stars, in the heart of the human warship, Commander Elias Roque watched the core world shift in his sights. Still calm, still unmoving. But his hands had found the controls, and his eyes had found their target. A hush settled over the Vindicator's bridge. It wasn't silence in the traditional sense. There was always sound on a warship, the hum of power conduits, the whisper of recycled air, the soft tap of boots on metal. But this quiet was different. This was the quiet of a hunter before the strike, of a message waiting to be delivered in full. Commander Elias Roque stood in front of the central display as a secure feed opened. The last image from the ground team's extraction mission came through, blurry at first, then sharpening into definition. A narrow escape tunnel, lit by muzzle flashes. Dominion guards collapsing one by one. And in the center, shielded by the human strike team, a figure no taller than Roque's shoulder, walking forward without fear. The girl. Her name was Ava. She had not cried during her rescue. She had not panicked when the breach alarms screamed through the black cell corridors. She hadn't even flinched when the Dominion unleashed their elite troopers. She had simply walked, unblinking, absorbing everything. And now she was here, on board the ship that had once carried war into the farthest corners of the galaxy. Now, repurposed as a shield, or perhaps something more dangerous, a spotlight. Eva sat in the observation chamber overlooking the stars. She said nothing. She hadn't said much since arriving, but the systems around her spoke for her. The lights brightened when she stepped close. The doors opened without touch. Even the internal sensors adjusted to her rhythm, like the ship recognized something it had long forgotten. Command without hierarchy. Roque entered the room quietly, a data slate in hand. "They're calling it an act of war," he said. "Empire High Council is demanding immediate surrender. Earth Command has gone silent." Eva didn't move. "I suppose they're trying to figure out what to do with us," Roque added. She turned, eyes calm. "You mean what to do with me?" He nodded. "Yes." Her gaze returned to the stars. They think I broke the rules. You did, Roke said, but maybe the rules were the problem. She turned slightly toward him. Do you know what they did to the others? The ones who came before me? Roke swallowed. Some of it. They weren't trying to build a soldier, Eva said. They were trying to control one. Make something smarter, faster, able to survive anything, but still willing to take orders. And you weren't, Roke guessed. Eva shook her head. I listened. I learned. But I wasn't made to obey. Roke crossed the room and sat across from her. What were you made for? Her expression didn't change. Adaptation. A pause passed like a shadow over the stars. Roke looked down at the data slate. Black Cell 12 was gone. The Dominion had sent a demolition drone hours after the rescue. Erased the asteroid from orbit. No survivors, no trace. Do you know how many systems you disrupted just by walking onto this ship? He asked. Eva's response was quiet. All of them. And you did that? On purpose? No, she said. I did it because they were already broken. I just made them stop pretending. Roke sighed, then stood. Earth Command sent a ship. Containment class. They're not asking for a meeting. They're scared, Eva said. Yes. Good, she replied. Roke blinked. I'm not going back, she continued. Not to Earth, not to the Empire. I'm not here to be kept in a box again. And if they try? She looked at him then, really looked. And in that moment, Roke saw the quiet truth behind her eyes. It wasn't hate. It wasn't rage. It was disappointment. The kind a teacher might feel for a student who never listened. If they try, she said, they'll learn. The console blinked. Mara's voice crackled through the comms. Commander, containment vessel is hailing. Orders? Roke didn't answer right away. He looked at Eva. She said nothing, but he could feel the choice passing into his hands like a weight made of history. He tapped the comm. Open channel. The screen lit up. Adira Voss, High Marshal of Earth Command, stared back at him. Her face was lined by war and weariness. Commander Roke, she said, you've exceeded your mission scope. Return the asset immediately, or we'll be forced to intervene. She's not an asset, Roke replied. She's the reason you still have a fleet. She's a liability. No, Roke said. She's a mirror, and you don't like what you see. Voss leaned forward. This is your final chance. Roke looked at Eva. She gave a single nod. He turned back to the screen. Final chances go both ways. He ended the transmission. The bridge lights dimmed as the Vindicator came alive. Systems aligned. Shields powered. Cloaked frigates repositioned across the defensive grid. But no weapons fired. No engines flared. The ship simply was. An idea given shape. Wrapped in steel and shadow. On the screen, the containment vessel powered up its primary cannon. 6 escort ships locked targeting arrays. They're really going to try it, Mara said, her voice low. Roke said nothing. Eva stood, walked to the central console, and placed her hand gently on the interface. The Vindicator's systems responded instantly, not in fear, not in anger, but in purpose. Across the enemy fleet, red lights flickered. Weapon systems failed. Engines shut down. Targeting computers blinked out, then rebooted with nothing but static. The Terran fleet was blinded in seconds. Eva opened a channel, not to command, not to the Empire, but to everyone. Her voice filled the stars. You built cages and called them systems. You used fear to call it order. You broke people and called it peace. I'm not here to destroy you. I'm here to set the clock back to zero. And with that, she cut the signal. The Vindicator turned slowly, drifting away from the core. The Empire didn't follow. Earth didn't fire. Because they knew. Something new had entered the galaxy. And it didn't ask for permission. It simply began.